Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I look nothing like Bridget McKenzie, who's on your program, but it was good to be with her actually last Friday in Melbourne for the annual AgMin conference, where no doubt a lot of aspects of your industry were discussed, and certainly I hope Bridget gets the opportunity to come along and speak to you, because in my opinion she's doing a fine job. So firstly, thank you so much for inviting me to attend your conference. It's a welcome relief to do something other than what I've been dealing with the last 24 hours, and unless you're unaware of it, shark control program is under my portfolio. So with the unfortunate attack in the Whitsundays recently, the media have been hounding me about that particular issue. So it's good to be here at a refreshing conference talking about another successful part of my portfolio, and a part of my portfolio in the industry I'm very passionate about. So I want to really thank the organisers first up for their collaboration in making this conference possible. Live Corp, Australian Livestock Export Council, also Queensland Livestock Exporters Association, and all the participants that have made it available to occur today. And it's great you timed it with a opportunity to have a ship in port as well to see the operation as well. I'm yet to have that opportunity, but certainly would welcome that down the track. So I am very pleased to be here on the opening day of your conference and welcome your theme of welfare beyond borders. I think that's a bold theme and something we all need to discuss and grasp and have an understanding about that moving forward. So I want to briefly speak firstly about the importance of agriculture in Queensland, and certainly through the engagement of international collaborating countries as well. It would be remiss of me not to first mention the ongoing drought, and for those of you that are Queenslanders and abroad would know that we've been in drought since 2013, and I get a bit frustrated at times when you hear the media talking about, you know, certain other subjects in other circumstances where this is a long, sustainable, insidious drought that they're all going through, and it's affecting not only people like yourself in the room that come from the land, but it's affecting right across the board, right through primary producers, right through the supply chain, and right on through the whole sector. So it's important we remind people of the situation that's happening in our brothers and sisters out there on the land, and how they're doing it so tough. Equally, this year in February, on terms of the monsoonal event, I travelled out there to Richmond and Julia Creek on the 11th day, and those images of seeing those cattle, you know, up against fences, over 500,000 estimated head of cattle perished as a result of that monsoonal event. I'll never forget, and I'm very, very pleased to know that a lot of those people are doing their best to try and get that back on board. So it's important that we recognise the challenges of this industry and those people on the land that are doing it quite extremely difficult. So turning to my department, it's continuing to work with all levels of government, and we're recovering in our rebuilding phases to get all our cattle enterprises returning to those conditions and resembling normal operation as soon as possible. And the department's forecast for 2018-19 on the gross value produce of Queensland's primary industry commodities at the farm gate is to be nearly $13.89 million. So that's forecast at 5% on average less over the last 5 years as a result of the enduring drought. So it demonstrates another focus on the importance of looking at how we address the drought. And no doubt beef is a major contributor to export revenue, and some $5.4 billion in export sales in 2018-19, an increase on the previous year, is something to be proud of as well. And those stats also are disguised by the reality of the cattle turn-off is being heavily impacted by the drought, and indeed the fortunate that export demand for our beef and cattle has met very active demand. Those traditional buyers of Japan, Korea, United States, Indonesia, Vietnam, and the newcomer China is good to see the continuing support by those countries. And certainly in the last couple of years of my engagement with some of those countries, I think the reputation we're built in, not only Queensland but Australia, of good quality beef, both live and produced meat, is a reputation that people should be proud of. No doubt the live cattle trade is not immune from the worst drought many have seen in living memory, but a particular point I've heard and mentioned is that the live trade is probably one of the most effective ways of the North to deal with drought, particularly in managing the turn-off of younger cattle to export markets. And in terms of Queensland, in 2018-19, the Port of Townsville estimates that nearly 300,000 head of cattle passed through this facility just across the river here. And Queensland's live cattle exports are valued at $371 million, which is 22% of the $1.6 billion of Australian trade. And the Port of Townsville made a major contributing result of that for the export activity. So cattle exported live has been positively influenced by the increase in numbers exported to Vietnam, achieving a 43% increase in 2018-19, year on year. Interesting, the beef sales to Vietnam in 2018 correspondingly increased by 69%, an increase in demand for protein in that market. So sales to Indonesia, where I'll be on Sunday, and live cattle and box beef has eased. So with this conference, our minds turns to critical importance of maintaining high levels of welfare standards right across the supply chain and beyond the borders as key international markets. And while the Palaszczuk government administers animal welfare within Queensland borders, it's acknowledged that the Export Supply Chain Assurance Scheme has proved itself to be a key asset for the industry abroad. And the scheme adds a valuable dimension to changing behaviours in the foreign markets via training through the professional leadership of our exporters. And with the conference theme being welfare beyond boundaries, these 2 days represent an excellent opportunity for everyone to have a celebration, but also a discussion around that particular theme and the achievements received so far. We can also look at how our quality systems could be improved better to demonstrate an ongoing commitment not only to the increasing welfare alert Australian community, but also to our trading partners. And no doubt many of you, regardless of what state you're in, you've seen a growing increase in activities. I'll refer to them as animal activists. As a government, we've approached that in a manner of looking at changes to legislation, both through regulations, both through legislation where we've got before the House at present, of treating their activities, the unlawful activities they take, as clearly being unlawful. So we're upping the ante on the manner in which their behaviour has been, in my opinion, affecting honest, decent people that are doing a good business, trying to operate in the grounds that they have in place. And as a government, we will not tolerate that behaviour. I also note that the review of Australian standards of the export of livestock standards released earlier this year as an example of the drive for continuing improvement, and that's likely to move work necessary for getting the balance right in terms of management and regulatory approaches in all circumstances. For one example, the Palaszczuk government recent concession made by the federal government, we note that with respect to the mandatory posting of welfare observers on all voyages. And this shift towards a risk-based approach is a commendable step forward and should help to address the cost of appropriately managing animal welfare. Palaszczuk government continues to work with the federal government and industry biosecurity and welfare stakeholders to ensure the live export trade operates sustainably and profitably, and we will play our role in the joint custodians of cattle welfare in this state. And as a Queensland Minister for Agriculture, my clear mandate is to partner with industry and our interstate and also the university and international collaborations to boost the sustainable growth, the development of our agriculture and food businesses. Queensland is definitely ideally located to capitalise on the growing markets of Asia Pacific, particularly when it comes to protein. And that's why this region which by 2050 will account for more than half the world's population also. So the livestock exports play an important role in providing nutrition to developing economies, which inadequate cold chains and also high costs or cultural preferences prohibit the acceptance of chilled box beef or frozen carcass beef. And I think to some extent we all need to have a role in educating people out there the importance why we need an live export trade. Having travelled to locations in the Middle East, to Indonesia, to certain parts of Asia, I understand the cultural differences and the challenges in respect to those people that live in those countries not having the same access to, whether it be a refrigerator, whether it be to a freezer, the same things that we have in this country and other examples. So it is important and incumbent on all of us to make sure we get that message through why it is important to have a live export industry. So as I mentioned earlier, I certainly will be encouraged to return to Indonesia and see how the trade's going there, going to some feedlots, but also I'll continue to pledge my engagement as a leader in Queensland government supporting this industry, but also engaging with consumers and stakeholders from internationally abroad also. So how's the Queensland government assisting the cattle industry? Well, one thing we're doing is our state's strong record in research, development, innovation and trade development, as well as biosecurity. And our government manages to invest over $126 million last year in innovation research, development and extension services to enhance our agricultural business productivity. And Agri Science Queensland, my department's research and development business arm, is supported by 24 research facilities across Queensland. One of those facilities is Spyglass, just west of here, and located just around near Charters Towers. It's a great facility, and the research of those facilities delivers productivity improvements in cattle genetics, feeding, reproduction, and adoption of new technology and management techniques that passes on through to graziers and extension services. So in closing, I wish all the participants in the conference well and success in dealing. Make sure you engage with one another and learn from one another about what the issues are in your sectors and trade, but reach out and talk to governments, because it's without you we don't have the feedback and the ability to understand the challenges before us as we move ahead in terms of addressing some of the matters in your important industry. So once again, thank you for having me along this afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you.